Welcome to Be Your Best in Business, the only podcast that helps ambitious professionals and businesses improve your performance, understand and control your business, all while designing your very own work-life balance.
Our own material, we love it. We love it like it's our child or our puppy. And it's not, it's just content. We need to loosen up about that. We need to stop taking ourselves too seriously. And we need to start thinking, look, is this actually any good for the audience that's going to be there?
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Be Your Best in Business. I'm your host this afternoon, Ian Luckett from Innovate to Success. And today we've got a really, really awesome guest. We've got Lee Jackson on the podcast this afternoon. We're going to be having a chat with Lee. Now, if you don't know, Lee is an international speaker. He's a presentation coach. And can you believe, and I need to find out how he's managed to do this, he's written 12 books. Yes, 12 books. So having worked in the voluntary, public and private sectors over the years, he now works in business and education, helping people to get good in challenging times. So in 2017, he was the president of the Professional Speaking Association in the UK and Ireland. He lives with his wife and twins in West Yorkshire. He loves good comedy, old school hip hop and a bit of basketball, but he doesn't like gardening. So welcome to the show, Lee.
Thank you very much. It's a real privilege to be here. As long as there's no gardening, we're okay.
No, you're all right. I was out there doing that bit of gardening yesterday, actually. It seemed to, we seem to have a short period of summer, i.e. the sun came out in the UK yesterday afternoon for about an hour. So I did rush out and trim a few hedges and bushes in the garden. You get a bit excited. Well, obviously you don't, but.
My wife loves it. I like sitting in the garden and I like providing tea and coffee for her. That's
that's about as far as it goes, is it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Excellent. Cool. Well, welcome to the show. And what we're going to be running through and talking about today is presenting and why we need to present and the importance of either presenting ourselves or presenting our businesses, what some of the key aspects are that we need to consider, as I say, as individuals and as an expert in this particular field and all of these books that you've written as well. And I know your latest book covers off this subject in absolute great detail. That's the purpose of why we're here today. Just talk to us about these books. What are these, the full detail of all these books, 12 books. That's a great achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it is really. And there's all sorts of different subjects. Some of them are co-written, so I haven't written 12 completely on my own. So about 4 or 5 of them were written with somebody else. So I did that, but that was a long time ago. But yeah, recently I've just kind of, you're right. Particularly when you're a speaker, you're an expert on a certain subject. And when you produce a keynote presentation, like I do a lot of, a keynote presentation in effect becomes a book plan.
Yeah, because it's a story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a story. It has a beginning and end. It has your key messages. And so actually it turns quite easily into a book. And my last book which is the first one fully on presenting, called Get Good at Presenting.
Yep.
So Get Good at Presenting is basically my presentation course in a book. And I started writing it by speaking into a dictaphone. And I just kind of, in effect, spoke out what I teach on a daily basis almost, and then sort of tidied that up and made it into a book. And people have been very kind about it, and it seems to have some good reviews, which is great.
The most interesting thing about this is when I was due to have an interview this morning that in actual fact got cancelled with some entrepreneurs about, how we can help them out with understanding their numbers and what they need to consider, and more on the commercial side of things, which is one of my specialities. But when you are starting your business or when you're in your business, that's a great analogy, is to start with your slide deck. What does your keynote deck look like? Because that can almost be your model. So you look at, who am I talking to? Why am I talking to them? What problem am I going to be solving? How do I, get to articulate my value over? And I think what you just mentioned there about having that model and having that slide deck kind of then just cascades, and that can cascade into books and into podcasts. So like this podcast actually fits into my business in terms of your personal development, because the things I want my listeners to get out of this podcast is how to develop yourself and get better at presenting. And I think that's a great analogy in the importance of getting your systems and your processes and your models all set up. So talking about models, talking about systems and talking about processes, tell me about your your journey in business? You know, where did it all start out for you, and kind of how did you get to where you are today, Lee?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I have a very unusual story, I think, for many people. Many speakers have often worked in an industry and then they, get early retirement, or they move out of that industry and then become a speaker on that industry. That was never my journey. And my journey, I was a youth worker. And I was a youth worker, and I started a charity in Leeds, and it was youth workers attached to schools. So we used to go into schools and do lunchtime clubs, assemblies, after school stuff. And I used to provide and used to run that charity and the team. And so a big part of my work was speaking. In fact, the first talk I ever did was in a primary school, which was kind of scary. And I did that with my dad. Back in
the kids scared you, did they?
Well, yeah, primary school, yeah, definitely. I work in high school still these days. About a third of my work's in high schools, and I still love that.
Yeah,
primary schools are really scary, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, because they don't hold back anything, do they? The little kids, they tell you if they don't like what you're saying.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, and teenagers too. But they're all so small in primary school. So that was my first thing. And when I set up this charity, what I used to love doing, I used to love some of the working with team and everything else, but actually I used to love doing the talks. And my first high school assembly, which was one of my first talks ever, I turned up and there was 600 teenagers in the room.
Wow.
And that was one of my first talks ever. So you kind of have to learn, you got to learn the hard way. I didn't start talking to 2 people, I started with 600, do you know what I mean? So you realize I'm going to have to get good at this pretty quickly. And because teenagers are reluctant, and so because I started in schools, the difference between schools and speaking in a business is that at the end of the day, even if you're rubbish and you're speaking in a business context, the people in the audience are paid to be there.
Yeah, that's right.
So even if you're boring, they're still going to get, £100 or more that day just by sitting listening to you.
Yeah.
But in a school, 98% of kids go to school and they don't want to be there, and they'd rather be anywhere else, and they don't want to see you. So you really have to earn your right to speak. And I think I learned a lot through that process, because what I teach in my course is that actually doing a talk or doing a presentation is not delivering a script. It's about engaging an audience. And those two things are very different in my opinion. Because I've heard people, you've probably heard people who have in effect had a script, and they've read it almost, or they've done it word for word. And you know what? And I often find those really boring, and I just want people to engage with me, engage with an audience, and not just do their usual shtick, as they say in the, in the entertainment industry. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably one of the most overlooked things in terms of understanding. And I remember, and I don't mind sharing this, I didn't get shot down at the time, but I got shot down afterwards. I was told in my last job, I was given a presentation to the board, and I thought, yeah, I'll be okay. I'll be able to blag this. And someone gave me the deck literally about an hour or so before, and I read the deck, and then I went in and bombed out basically because I didn't understand the deck. And it's a great Einstein saying, isn't it? If you can't explain something clearly enough, you don't understand it well enough, something like that.
Yeah.
And this dwells on the point about knowing your subject, knowing your audience, and how you build that engagement and that connection with them. But it's also about understanding what you're bloody well talking about. If you don't understand the subject matter, then either don't talk about it or go and research it and find out, how you become knowledgeable in that area.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, I think that might have been Einstein's quote.
Yeah.
If you can't explain to a 6-year-old, you do not understand it.
No.
And I think that's for big issues as well as small stuff and pitching for business and that kind of thing. But even then, I think on the whole, people, when they present, people put too much information in.
Value overload.
Oh, it's ridiculous. When I work with clients and I work with their presentations, for most of them, after about 10 minutes of listening to them, I say, let me just stop you there. You can get rid of about a third, if not a half, of the content that you're delivering, and your talk will be better for it. And they're like, but they want detail. They want detail. I said, yeah, of course you want detail. That's what a handout's for.
Yeah.
That's That's what a PDF's for. You shouldn't have all the detail in your talk.
Was there a 10, 20, 30 slide, wasn't there, with in the early days of PowerPoint? Was it no more than 10 slides, no more than 20 points, and no more than 30 minutes or something like that, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that before. There's lots of those kind of things that go around. Well, yeah. But I mean, yeah, every talk is different. But so say if you're pitching for business, if you're pitching to, get a big £200,000 contract from somebody, I often say that, people are often there. They might be the seventh person they've seen that day. Yeah. And if you go in there with the same PowerPoint as everyone else and they all start the same, my name is blah, blah, blah. My business is called blah, blah, blah. We were set up in 1998, and they just go through a history of their business and what they do. And everybody sounds the same. And it's about finding that difference. So get good at presenting is understanding what the audience really wants. I was just saying that's what they're screaming at us. You probably know that, Ian, but they're screaming, WIIFM, what's in it for me? The audience is sat there going, I don't care about your expertise. And I learned that in schools. They don't care who I am. They want to know what's in it for me right now. And if you answer that in the first 3 minutes, you'll find it a much more engaging presentation. And
as a business point of view as well, what's in it for me? What problem are you going to solve? Why are you talking to me? And do you know who I actually am? And there were some great courses and books that I did with Brian Tracy, and it just puts it into so simplistic terms. And it's like, well, that's how I'd get engaged. And that's why, when people relate to other people in terms of storytelling, I think I've said this before, but years and years and years ago, maybe not that long ago, but, a while ago, I just didn't get the comedian Jack D. Just didn't get him. Didn't find it funny. Okay. Didn't think anything, I just thought, who's this guy here? Anyway, about 10 years later, when I'd got kids, and I've been in his situation and I could relate to him having a go at his wife for having the handbrake on in the car. I just found the guy hilarious. Why? Because all of a sudden I've got this connection with him that I'd now got a young family, and a lot of his jokes are about his young family and how that kind of works. And you're just locked on and you just end up sitting watching hours and hours and hours of his stand-up comedy because you connect with him. And it's just about that engagement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about different times and different connections. And of course, sometimes people don't realize that they don't know why they're not connecting with people. So our job as a speaker, so when I mean speaker, that means any time you're up front, our job, I think, is about not only telling them what's in it for them, knowing them, but our job ultimately as a speaker is to filter. Our job is to filter our knowledge and only give what we do. So if you look at TED Talks, and there's lots of books being written about TED Talks and stuff, if you look at them, why did TED Talks become so popular about 5 or 6 years ago, whatever? And it's because they took an academic with 20 years of experience, they coached him or her, and they said, you've got a maximum of 18 minutes. And so they took 20 years experience and they got it down with good storytelling to 18 minutes. And that is the secret of a TED Talk.
That's the model where they've pulled that through. So we're going to learn a little bit. We're going to get some tips and tricks from you a little bit later on in the show. But just jumping in here, what was your most difficult talk that kind of went wrong and how did you pull yourself out of it?
Do you know what? I can hold my hands up and say I've never had a disastrous talk. I've never had one that I just didn't engage because I've always been quite chatty, quite relaxed. I think my style is that I always would engage. I've had a few times when it could have gone wrong really badly. So I was speaking at a college in the north of England, and they put me in this massive room. And if you're an experienced speaker, the room means quite a lot because the wrong room is a nightmare, Ian. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So, okay. In terms of acoustics and all that.
Yeah. So the worst room you can get is you're in the middle of the room and it's long and thin.
Oh yeah.
Sort of landscape. So it's right, so you got a long way to look at the left, long way. So they put me in this hall and it was terrible. It was really wide and it was really deep. It was a really big hall. And instead of having an audience at the front, they had like pockets of chairs all over the hall. And it was really hard. It was like, what a nightmare. So it was really hard to engage, but I got them on board. I got it going and everything. And then in the middle of my talk, there was this lad at the back who was kind of a bit of the alpha male. He was sort of, chatting and all the rest of it. And I was trying to keep him engaged. And all of a sudden he was leaning back on his chair and I could see him rocking as I was speaking. And he went back on his chair and fell off his chair.
I shouldn't laugh.
In the middle of the room. But not only that, he took out about 7 people next to him.
Oh my word.
His arms flailed out and there was about 4 or 5 chairs and everyone just kind of fell about laughing or were on the floor themselves. And so I thought, what do I do here? So I had a radio mic on. So I just stopped what I was saying. I just quietly walked to the back. I just checked he wasn't dead. And then I gave him a look like, you're going to be quiet now. And then I walked back to the front again and just carried on.
That could have gone one or two ways, couldn't it?
Well, I thought, am I going to call an ambulance here? Do you know what I mean? What was the deal? But he was fine. It was just his pride that was hurt. But the great thing was I got nothing out of the alpha male after that. He was as quiet as a mouse and we all cracked on, had a good time.
I suppose that's one of the dangers, isn't it? When you get hecklers. Have you ever had any really bad hecklers? I suppose it's probably not that type of environment, is it? Because that's normally comedy that pulls that one forward.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of comedy. I've done a bit of stand-up.
Yeah?
But I've never really had hecklers. Yeah, I've done a comedy course. I've done a stand-up about 3 or 4 times just for stretching me for my personal development. Do you know what I mean?
That's got to be nerve-wracking comedy though, isn't it? Because I mean, that is, if you've got a business talk, they're either going to be interested or they're not going to be interested. But if you're expecting a reaction and a connection with the audience and you don't get it, that is hard, isn't it? How do they prepare you for that?
Comedy. So I went on like an 8-week course or something. And we're doing stuff. And, confidence was never an issue for me. I'm good at speaking, obviously. So I didn't have to get over that. But actually, it was the timings was just, I call it speaking on speed, right? Because if you're doing a keynote, so if I do like an hour's keynote presentation at a conference, then if I get a laugh or a smile every 3 or 4 minutes, I'm probably happy. Do you know what I mean? Keeps them ticking over. I know that I'm doing a good job. I know that I'm engaging them. But comedy, the aim is every 20 seconds.
Really?
So every 20 to 30 seconds, you're looking for a laugh or at least a kind of a little smile kind of thing. And honestly, that intensity. So I did I think it was a 5 or 10 minute set at the end of my course with everybody else. But it was a real comedy club. It was people there that we knew, people that we didn't know. And that was the most nerve-wracking I've ever been in my life, definitely.
If somebody doesn't get what you're talking about from a business point of view, they don't kind of tell you they don't get it. But if they don't smile, if they don't laugh at you, then everyone else knows that no one else thinks it's entertaining, do they?
Yeah. Well, it's a different transaction, Ian, isn't it? So in a comedy club, I'm paying my 10 quid. I'm sat there with a pint or a glass of wine and I'm saying, you make me laugh. I've had a terrible day. You make me laugh. That's kind of what they're shouting at you. But in a business context, it's different. You've got more time to explain things. You've got the ability to say, look, this will help you. Or, this content's going to change your life or it's going to make your life easier. Or like you said, I'm going to solve this problem. Yeah. That isn't comedy. Comedy is hardcore. It really is.
We know a little bit more about you. We kind of know, where you've come from and what you're doing. We're talking about all the time USPs, and you see that people are speakers, and you've got a great accolade here of the president of the Professional Speakers Association, and up there with the authors of the speakers and everything like this. Now, anyone can kind of call themselves a speaker, and I guess I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here and say, why, and this isn't an advert, but this is to understand your kind of business model. Why do you consider that you're different to other speakers? Why would somebody want to get hold of you instead of other people to purvey their message?
Yeah, well, if your listeners look at the photograph on the podcast, they'll see a photograph of me. If you're from the UK, you realize that I look like Keith Chegwin. Now, so that they'll get from me someone who looks like Keith Chegwin, but isn't. So that's the first thing they get from me. But I guess really, no one else can be Lee Jackson. This is one of my key messages. Yeah. It's about authenticity, right? What I bring is different. I haven't had, I have never been an entrepreneur, right? That's not my background, but I have started a charity. And I've got that, and and I've worked in different contexts. I've worked in all 3 sectors now. So when I I occasionally work in the voluntary sector a couple of times a year. And when I work in the public sector, I've worked there. I know it well. When I work in the private sector, I've worked there and I know that well too. So it always, when you're a speaker, you always bring in everything. You bring in all your experience, but ultimately you're bringing your authenticity to it. There's no one else can do it. So, there's lots of people that have been on your podcast who are far more experienced than me in lots of different things. But because I've kind of been a speaker for 24 years now, and the last 10 years full-time professional, that brings a lot to the table, I think.
It's interesting how some of these subjects are coming around. It's about personal brand, isn't it? It's about understanding, this is Lee Jackson. Yeah, well, he's going to deliver a good speech. He's a nice, likable guy. He's going to be a bit of a crack. And, we've had a couple of conversations. You can kind of pick that up really, really quickly. This is the bit, I guess, as we lean into, why do people need to learn how to present? Because let's split this two ways then. So if we look about the individual, so as an individual in business, what are the key things that an individual in business needs to consider from a point of view of, why they would need to present?
Yeah, well, first of all, as long as they've done their background, their due diligence, that they know that their stuff is good and it'll sell. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
So if you work on that basis that they've done that and they know that the product is sound and they can sell that, then what you have to do is obviously, like you said, is make sure it's solving a problem. And then once you've got that, is filtering that message so that people get it straight away what you're delivering. So it is all about that simplification process. And when I wrote this book, when I wrote Get Good at Presenting in the autumn, you know what? It was such a difficult process for me because it sounded easy, like, that's my day's course. And I told you earlier, I spoke it into a dictaphone to get it out of my head. Then someone typed it up and then I edited it 100 times to get it right. But that process of simplification does so much to you and to me that I ended up having some phrases that I could remember. I ended up getting rid of lots of stuff that I know I didn't need. And the book's still, 38,000 words. It's still a decent sized book.
Yeah.
But that process of simplification, that process of, look, I can throw this stuff away now, I think is the most helpful process you go through. And I wonder that's why presentations are so important, that it does get you to the core of your message.
How do you know, or how do you tell if you've put too much into a presentation? So you're in danger of overwhelming your audience. Because I did this, to be honest with you, again, I've kind of hold my hands up because I'm not really too bothered about sharing some of the mistakes that I've made. But I did a business masterclass a few months ago, and it was a low cost event before a networking breakfast. And I delivered so much value and workbook and PDF and everything in this 2-hour session. I took their heads off. They didn't know if they were punch drunk or caught or something by the time they'd finished. But luckily for me, I got somebody who gave me some really, really constructive feedback about it and sort of said that was probably the wrong audience for that sort of thing. I've turned that now into a 6-step business buzz online program. And it's now at the right level where I've now put in accompanied videos to it. And I've now just kind of chilled out a little bit. And I said, right, that's the PDFs, that's the structure, that's the model. I want people to do this in these areas because if they do that, then it's going to help them build their business. Whack a few videos with it. And all of a sudden, I've got this fantastic product. I've got some brilliant feedback over, but I was trying to put so much in to start with. And if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't be where I am with the online product today. How can you tell whether you've just got too much in there?
Well, the first thing you need to do is exactly what you did, is you need to let someone else see it.
Right. That's my first mistake then, because I thought I'd do it all on my own.
The problem is we're all too close, right? So I wrote another book called PowerPoint Surgery, and it was trying to solve the problem of death by PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And I do mention it in the other book as well, Get Good at Presenting, as a chapter on slides. Because basically what happens is, so if your slides are never your talk, right? So your slides are you, not the talk.
Yeah.
So when people say, I'll send you my talk, they don't mean that. They mean, I'll send you my slides. But the same thing happens with slides. What happens is people make a slide or they make content and it becomes like their little baby and they're almost their little puppy. I think of it sometimes as the PowerPoint puppy.
Yeah.
That they become so precious. It's like, oh, this is my little puppy. I spent hours making this and I put this animated GIF in the corner. And I, that's my logo, and I spent £1,000 on that logo, and I want to put this, and this is my content, and I did this, and basically what happens is I train people with it, and I sometimes have a little puppy with me, a fake puppy, not a real one, and I say, look, you got to shoot the puppy because you can't be too close to something that actually you're not willing to get rid of it, and the problem, our own material, we love it. We love it like it's our child or our puppy. And it's not. It's just content. We need to loosen up about that. We need to stop taking ourselves too seriously, and we need to start thinking, look, is this actually any good for the audience that's going to be there?
Are they going to be able to take it away and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. Because really, you know what? I go to conferences and you might be sat there all day, but I bet when you sat there all day, you might take away 3 things from a conference.
Yeah.
You know, you might make 1,000 notes, Ian. Do you know what I mean? We might have notebooks full of stuff, or we're on our iPads and we're filling. But you know what? You rarely go back to that stuff. The best thing that works is I'm going to write these 3 things down. I'm going to action these next Monday. That's what makes the difference, I think.
I must admit, I was in a 2-day event last year with, I think it was last year with a guy called Nick James. Have you heard of Nick James?
No.
Big events guy in the UK, runs out of Birmingham. He's on the podcast early on, I think, very early on in there. But you weren't allowed to go home until you'd taken notes on what actions you were going to take away.
Okay.
It was almost the point of saying, look, I've given you so much value over these last 2 days. I think you did it one each day. You know, you're not going home now until you've written down what you're going to do. You're kind of, your neighbours checked it out and you've written good 3 things on you, 3 things on your business, and 3 things kind of for the future sort of thing. Because if you don't, you kind of get caught up in the moment, and you can get a bit theatrical, can't it? You can kind of get into these rooms where you get into the buzz and you get into the atmosphere, and you do lose sense on reality, because people move into your persona, don't they, while you're on stage, and they sort of think, oh yeah, that's really good, and Lee's doing this and Lee's doing that. I guess they kind of think that sometimes they are you, and then they lose track on why they're there. But so it was really good to take stock and to make some notes. I'm a bit of a mad planner myself, actually, so I wouldn't have left there anyway without doing that.
Part of that's down to personality types, isn't it? But
yeah.
But ultimately, you know, a speaker is someone who entertains on one level and gives value. So it's entertainment and education. You know, like the BBC the BBC exists to educate, entertain, and inform. That's what it says on the plaque outside the BBC. And I think that's what we do. You know, there's got to be a level of entertainment, otherwise you'd fall asleep.
Yeah. The
danger is when you get a speaker, I think, that becomes, unless they're an after dinner speaker, which is a different thing, but some speakers at a conference, they become 80% entertainment and 20% content.
Yeah.
You want to get that mix a little bit more balanced. Do you know what I mean? That you are engaging enough, but delivering solid content. I think that's the mix, really.
And making sure that they understand it and they kind of take it away as well. Okay, let's get into some technicals now then.
Sure.
So what are some of the top 3 things that people in business need to consider so that we can, you know, present ourselves properly and we can really nail that next seminar, presentation, talk, whatever it is?
Sure. Well, the first thing is to get to the core of your message. Get to really know what you are going to say. So not the 1,000 things that you're going to mention, but what's the thing? So if they could take away one thing, what would that be? Okay, I'll give you 3. If they could take away 3 things, that's the core of your message. Until you get to that point, then you will do a dull presentation. That's the reality.
Do you mean getting to the specifics of why we're sitting here rather than dancing around your credentials and all these types of things?
Yeah, get to that point where, you know, this is what I really want them to understand. This one thing is what I want them to understand, or these 3 things I want them to understand. So the worst case scenario with that is an academic lecturer. A bad academic lecturer will tell you everything they know because they're an expert. And, you know, my daughters say this at university, and 80% of their lectures are terrible because they're just an expert just chatting away. And, you know, if they got to the core of their message, it would make it much more engaging. And it also helps the preparation process too.
Just quickly on that point then, have you got some rough percentages of a speech? Because obviously you have a bit of an intro, you've got the core message, and then you've got your kind of call to action, and then you're wrapping up. I've heard different variances in terms of how much time you should spend on each. What do you use in that scenario?
I think it's daft to put percentages on it, because then it becomes a straitjacket for you.
Right. Okay.
What I teach in the book, it's about chunks. So a talk is not a talk. People get nervous, right? Because they think, I've got to do this big presentation. It's never actually a big presentation. What it is a series of chunks of stuff that you join together.
Yeah.
So if you think of every chunk as, say, 3 minutes, so you have a Post-it note and you write down, you know, maybe you got 12 Post-it notes with those little chunks of stuff that you want to communicate, then think of it as that. So you're always linking chunks of stuff together, information, content, and so it could be introduction, you know, outro, And in those chunks, there's going to be always something. So every 3 minutes or so, you're changing the focus, you're changing your style, you're moving to a different side of the room, a different side of the stage. So that's one of the things that helps. Think of them as chunks rather than a whole thing.
Okay.
So then you don't have to worry about the percentages. You could just, well, I'm adding another chunk and I'll remove that chunk. Do you know what I mean? So,
and then you just change the topic essentially.
Yeah. So that definitely works well. And I've seen that in lots of ways, because you got to get away from your computer when you're planning. So the chunking thing, get to the core of your message, then start using chunks will get you on Post-it notes and cards rather than sat there on PowerPoint or Keynote. Or even worse, Prezi.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, Prezi's the one that zooms in and out and makes you feel seasick.
Oh, really?
People often say to me, I use Prezi, I'm fine. And I'm like, yeah, you are, but I have to take a tablet before I watch it because it just zooms in and out and makes me feel sick.
Be something similar to like a Camtasia type of thing where they just zoom in and out on the video editing then.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's they call it a non-linear presentation.
Right.
But basically it's like a mind map that you zoom into basically. People use it. Oh, right. People use it a little bit, but it can be used well. But on the whole, it makes me feel seasick.
Don't use that one then. Don't use that one. So the first point was get to the core of your message.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is tell more stories. If any presentation coach isn't talking about stories, they're not doing their job. So instead of go back to a pitch. If you're pitching some work or what you've done, instead of just giving loads of numbers the whole time, tell a client's story. Tell the story of how you changed that client's life, how you saved them £100,000 because you did this saving or you showed them this, whatever it is. But tell that story, and all of a sudden your Excel spreadsheet comes to life. And that makes an enormous difference.
Again, that's the connection thing, the engagement, and it's getting to know your audience, isn't it? And connecting with that audience, which is really key.
Absolutely. Which brings me on to my third one, which is be 125%. Be 125%. Now, those of you into finance, that's really winding you up because that's a figure. That's a figure that doesn't exist, right? Do you know what I mean?
Don't wind me up, but I know what you mean.
Like footballers. I gave it 110%. Well, no, you didn't, mate. You gave it either 100% or less than 100%.
Absolutely.
But 125% is be 100% you from the stage, because it's about authentic people. People buy from people. They want real people, no BS, just real people being authentic. So be 100% you, but be 25% bigger because you're doing a presentation. So be a little bit bigger and bolder than you are in real life. Raise your voice slightly more than just having a normal conversation, and be slightly funnier than you are in real life. That's what a presentation's about.
Bigger in the voice, bigger in the stance, and bigger in the message, I guess, is what you're saying there.
The worst presenters in the world are those that become smaller on stage. The ones that hide behind their laptop or hide behind the podium and seem to almost shrink, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because they're being less themselves. The whole point is to work on the self-confidence so that, look, I'm Lee Jackson. This is who I am. Take me or leave me. Like me or love me or hate me. I don't really care. This is what I've got to deliver today. And I'm going to make it interesting because I'm going to be 25% bigger and better and more fun than I am in real life.
I think that's where a lot of people get a bit nervous when they're starting out in business, and they, you start talking about the personal brand and have I got to go and, if you're in the, want to do something online, is it going to be a case of that people going to like me? You've got to just brush that aside, because if people don't like you, they're not going to buy from you anyway. So don't worry about that. It doesn't matter what your message is, what your product is. If they don't trust you, then they're never going to, they're not going to buy anything.
Fair enough, yeah.
And you kind of need to, if you think of the earlier adage I've always had on this was that people don't leave companies, they leave people, they leave the bosses. And I thought, when someone first said this to me, I said, nah, that's a load of old rubbish. And then I thought back, every single time I'd resigned, it was because I'd either fallen out with someone, they'd fallen out with me, or it just wasn't, it just wasn't working.
I get that now. I get that. That's a good point. Yeah.
When you get to I put myself out there on video and you got to think, people are going to like this or they're not. Do you know what? If people don't like it, I've had enough feedback to say it's great, it's relevant, and I get it. And those are the people I want to work with, because number one, they're going to embrace the product and the service, and they're going to run off and go and tell a load of other people. But if people can't go, oh, no, I don't like that. Well, brilliant. Carry on. Thanks very much. If there's anything I can help you with, give me a shout, sort of thing, not getting too precious about it. And that's exactly the same as you. You'll have a certain amount of people who'll be standing there going, this guy is brilliant. And they're going to be the ones who are going to go to the next person and say, you need to book that guy because he was really funny and really well connected and a great message. And I think you can wind yourself up and get yourself in a bit of a knot when you're starting out, if you're in a position of starting out of worrying that people won't like you. And I just say, don't worry about it. It's not worth worrying about.
Yeah, you can't live your life like that. Some people say to me, particularly my friends who are not kind of self-employed or running their own business, they'll say to me, I've got a job interview next week. I'm really nervous. And they'll say that to me. And I'm like, well, I'm self-employed, right? So I work for myself and run my own business. So I have about 3 or 4 job interviews a day.
Yeah. Do
you know what I mean? Because I'm always ringing someone up, or someone rings me up or emails me and says, are you available, in 3 months' time for this gig? That's a job interview.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why get nervous about one job interview? Because I get them all the time. And you just get more resilient, I think, when you work for yourself on one level, because you've got to get used to the no's and you've got to get used to people not liking you. And, that's fine. That's fair enough. I'm okay with that now.
It's about feedback as well. If you don't, and I cover this off, and I'm not trying to link everything in this podcast back to what I do, but it seems like it. So don't don't take it like I've been listening to this. But it's like taking a mentor or taking, listening to people. Now, when you go out the back and you go out, I walked out of a very big corporate job, and all of a sudden, it wasn't all of a sudden because I was kind of planning it anyway, but so I've done a certain amount of preparation in terms of getting the business ready. But if you can't take feedback, and absorb it and either throw it away or embrace it, then you're going to stay wherever you are, whether you're in business or whether you're in a particular role. You're going to stay kind of always do what you've always done. You're always going to get what you've always got, sort of thing. It's only when you take on that feedback and you go, do you know what? That was actually he was right. He's an expert in the field, and he said that was crap. Right, I need to buckle up and get my head down and get on with this. I need to get some help. I need to take that feedback, and feedback again. From this is really key, because then it just makes your next speech or your next presentation even better, and then people are going to want to listen to you. So that's great. Thanks for those 3 tips. That was really useful. Right, how do you manage your work-life balance, or don't you?
Correct. No, I love talking about this. Okay, work-life balance. The first thing to understand about that is there's no such thing.
Everyone's telling me that now.
Yeah. If anyone's trying to sell you a course on work-life balance, if their first 5 minutes isn't, there's no such thing as work-life balance, then they probably walk off the course right now, because you're not able to do that. You've got to make it. It's always a balancing act. When you're at work, at some level, your family will suffer, or you will suffer, whatever. Or when you're not, when you're having leisure time, then of course sometimes your business suffers. That's just how it works. And so we need to be careful that we're not looking for this kind of golden goose, I think.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as perfection, right? The idea is we have progress. So perfection is a killer. So give an example. Last Thursday, my wife works from home still, and she goes out and she teaches English. And she was working from home, and we had and she said, oh, there's a pop-up cafe, like a charity cafe that's just opened up a couple of miles away where we know. I said, oh, let's go for lunch. So I looked up, I didn't have any gigs on that day. I was in my office doing a bit of marketing, doing emails and stuff.
Yeah.
So I just said, okay, I'm going to have 2 hours off with my wife. And we went off and we had lunch in the middle of the day.
Brilliant.
Now, a productivity person would say, that's crazy. You've wasted all that time. I was like, why on earth am I self-employed?
If that's not what you want to do.
If I can't occasionally go and have a long lunch with my wife at a local cafe, do you know what I mean?
No, that's absolutely right.
I think it's about taking those little opportunities, and it's also about clocking off. So I try to have a day a week off if I can.
Yeah.
It's usually a Saturday, sometimes a Sunday, but I don't work unless I've got paid work on the weekend. I don't often work on a weekend unless I've got some crazy deadline. But on the whole, I just choose not to. And you have to use your time more efficiently during the week. Or, and this is something that people may disagree with, or do less. Take on less. Or maybe even, I'm getting radical now, Ian, maybe choose to earn less.
Yeah. It's not all about how much you've got. It's how much you've got left at the end of the month.
Yeah. One of the saddest things I see is when I've had friends and colleagues that I know who were on their second or third marriage and their life's falling apart, or they share with me, look, I don't see my kids, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, maybe you should not work so hard then.
Yeah.
Or you chose that job, or you chose, to run 3 companies instead of 1 or whatever. So honestly, being really blunt and Yorkshire about it, you've got to, basically, we are all a result of the choices that we make. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. And you see some of these people in these corporate roles, and, if you're happy with that, then kind of fill your boots. If you're not happy with that, then, stop chasing the next promotion, and you want to work this many years. You're a long time dead. And at the end of the day, recently I've been seeing some people who are later on in their years, and they are running from one meeting to the next to this, and they're heading for retirement. Now, that's kind of their aim. Oh, I'm going to get my pension. I said, you're going to be an absolute wreck when you get to your pension. What's the kind of, you can sit there and you haven't got health and you haven't got your wealth and all these other bits and pieces. And I know running your own business and, entrepreneurship and all the other bits and pieces are all quite shiny ball syndrome. And that's when people kind of fall over without a strategy. But yeah, the reason that I set the business up is because I actually want to spend more time with the family, which is having a counterproductive effect at the moment, just in case my wife listens to this. But I know that in the long run, it's going to have those opportunities where we can go, let's go away for the weekend. When? Tomorrow. Because we can.
Of course.
And that's not been big-headed about it. That's been because I've, put those choices in place. So tell me about Street Angels. What's that all about?
Yeah, so Street Angels, I was part of the Street Angel team. I was one of the people that set that up in Leeds. And we're an organisation, a voluntary organisation that goes out on the streets, and we basically help vulnerable people.
Brilliant.
Usually those who are drunk. So I've just taken a break from it now, but I've did it for 5.5 years, right. And it's been one of the best things I ever did. Brilliant. One of the best things I ever did. I absolutely love it. So we go out on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and you basically walk around in a big yellow jacket with a bit of first aid training, working with the police and stuff. And I've seen people jump in the canal.
Oh,
I've seen people. We've saved people from assault. We've saved people from getting robbed. We put hundreds of people in taxis and got them home safe, rang mums and dads and boyfriends and girlfriends and had people pick those. Yeah, basically trying to make Leeds a safer place, because I love my city of Leeds and I want to make it a safer place. And this was such a good laugh with so many great stories, but also kind of heartbreaking at the same time. You know what I mean? So
it is frightening. I work on the governing body of a local special school, and you kind of, you're helping some of the kids out, and then you kind of think that there's, there really are people out there who don't have the knowledge that there's actually help there and there's support there. And you see, I mean, it is quite sad really, because I really connect with what you're doing there. I mean, I was out in Bristol the other day doing some work, and there's a horrendous, I'm sure it's everywhere, but I was just out walking first thing in the morning, just trying to get awake a little bit. And there's a horrendous homelessness problem there. I saw this massive, I didn't know what it was when I walked up to it, to be honest with you. It was probably about 4 meters square, but it was actually a bed, and there was about 8 people sleeping in it. It was outside like the Abbey National Santander. God, how old are you, Ian? And it was like 4 meters square, but it was about 3 or 4 foot high, and it was just all sleeping bags and everything. When I looked closely, I thought somebody had gone round and picked up all the sleeping bags, but they hadn't. Yeah. There were people sleeping in there, and then got to the next guy who was sitting up there with his dog. So I said, right, what do you want? Coffee, bought him breakfast and things like that. And you just like knock them over with that. And it, puts the hairs on the back of your neck. And is it going to affect my life? No. Is it going to help his day? Yes. Let's do it. And I think it's really, really key to do those things and to give back to people who are less fortunate, because, I think it's just an important human skill that we need to, we need to kind of have, isn't it? So is that still going now, that charity?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just took a break when I was president of the PSA, because the Professional Speaking Association, because, work-life balance. I couldn't do everything. I was getting work on a Saturday morning, and for occasionally I had to do a lot of traveling that year, and I couldn't be out on a Friday night till 4 o'clock in the morning, and then be out at 8 o'clock on the Saturday. So I think we should all give some of our time occasionally just to a project where nobody knows your name, a project where no one knows, how successful you are or who you are. Just go and give And I think it makes a big difference.
Well, what goes around comes around. I certainly know that for certain. If you start handing out, a little bit of a handout here, and not necessarily money, but, if someone's looking a bit hungry, go and buy them some sandwiches. I mean, I took some bloke into Pret in the middle of London. My wife thought I was mad. He didn't know what to do with himself. And what did that cost me? £8, something like 7 or 8 quid. Did it affect my day? Yeah, it made me feel great. Not financially, it made his bloody day, and he was going to have a good meal inside him. So no, that's all good stuff. Now it's time for some Innovate to Success golden nuggets. Okay, question number 1 we've got here, Lee, is what would you tell your 25-year-old self if you were talking to him today?
Okay, well, the comedy answer to that question is learn how to shoot better at basketball, because I still play basketball, and I wish I'd learned more when I was 25, because now I'm 47. I'm struggling a little bit to keep up. So yeah, I should have worked harder on my basketball when I was 25.
Oh, excellent.
But no, the serious one is, I think, not be so bothered about what people think about you.
Yeah. Okay. Question 2. What subject would you lecture today if you were at university? What knowledge would you want to pass on to other people?
Well, I'd definitely do presentation skills. I'd probably also do some stuff about mindset, which is my motivational talks that I do, resilience and mindset. But actually, if I wasn't doing this job, and if I'd taken an academic approach, which is not me really, then I think I often do think the one thing I would have liked to have done and probably lecture about and learn about is anthropology.
All right.
So learning more about people and why groups of people act in certain ways. Like I'm always fascinated why does that group of people dress the same? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why do they look the same? You ever notice that some people look the same and they hang out with people who look similar to them?
That's a great answer. Okay, final question. What was your best investment or your best financial decision that you've ever made?
Best investment ever made non-financially was investing in myself and investing in my friends and family. That was the best investment, not a financial one. The best financial decision I've made is that from the age of 20 onwards, mid-20s, I and me and my wife, we chose to live without credit.
Brilliant.
We try and live, apart from the odd emergency here and there, we try and live within our means.
Yeah, very important.
And living within your means, you're talking about this work-life balance thing. When you live within your means to a certain level, you're not panicking and having to work because you've got a crazy mortgage that you're worried about paying.
Yeah.
So I think one of the best decisions you make is to have maybe not, don't go and get a Merc, maybe just get a Toyota, it's simple things like that. I know they're not very trendy to say, and I know it's not very fashionable, but it served me very well. And it reduced a lot of my stress.
It is unbelievable. Some of the people that I, sort of frequent with, they've got, cars that are worth over £100,000. Now, I've got visions of having some crazy cars because I love cars, but I will only have it when I can afford it. Could I afford it today? Yeah, probably could actually. Is it a good use of my money? Not at all. So guess what? We haven't got one. And when it comes to a time when I can afford to run one for a year because they're so unpractical, I'll do it. But I won't do it if I've got to, got to go crazy out of depth that I can't do. Now, certain things, I do believe in OPM, other people's money to buy certain things with, but only if you can realistically, what the outcome of the financial deal is, and that you can prepare to pay it back. Is when you see these people who get themselves in all sorts of debt over nothing, and you think, well, if you can't afford it, don't bloody have it.
Well, I mean, it's simple as that, and also that's a value statement, isn't it? That you're saying that things make you happy. I'll be honest with you, Ian. I don't think things do make us happy. Money gives us choices, but
100%.
Once you bought an amazing flat screen TV that's worth $2,000 from Costco, once you've bought that and you've watched it 3 times,
you bought it.
It's just your TV, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
No, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Invest in relationships more than things. That's my
100%. Well, Lee, I think we could probably sit here for the rest of the day chatting away, but I don't think that's going to be in our listeners' best interest. So, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I think we've hit some great tips and tricks there to help people out with their presenting skills and how they need to get themselves ready for success in business. Do you want to just let us know, apart from contacting you about gardening, which is an absolute no-no? Do you want to just let us us know how people can get in contact with you, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. So you can look at the book's called Get Good at Presenting. So if you want to just look at that, you'll find it from everywhere. It's on every store. Get Good at Presenting. If you want to get hold of me, I'm at leejackson.biz. That's leejackson.biz.
Excellent stuff. And then we've also got a Twitter on there at Lee Jackson as well, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, tweet me. I do a lot of Twitter, and once his shows come out, I'll tweet that and get it out there. It'd be great. Thank you so much for your time, Ian.
No, thanks very much. I've really enjoyed it. I think, presenting and getting out there and looking at your personal brand and connecting with people is something that is absolutely, on my important list of things that I coach people with. And hopefully this podcast has been very useful for many people. So thanks very much for your time. Good luck with the book. Good luck with the business. And I hope and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Ian. All the best. And thanks to all the listeners.
Cheers now. So thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please don't forget to share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you like the content, please don't forget also to subscribe, rate and review. That would be great. Thanks. If you want to keep up to date with all the latest tips, tricks and strategies at Innovative Success and receive priority emails, then don't forget to go to www.innovativesuccess.com and sign up for my weekly email list. We are committed to helping ambitious professionals and businesses improve your performance, understand and control your business, all while creating that work-life balance. Now you go and have a great day, and I'll catch up with you on the next episode.